There's a strange feeling that shows up in a lot of households. It's not panic, it's not failure. It's quieter than that. It's the feeling of doing everything right and still feeling like you're standing on thin ice. 2 adults, 2 jobs, 2 paychecks, and yet somehow there's no room to breathe. I see this pattern over and over. People don't say they're broke, they say they're fine, but they say it with tension in their voice. They say it while checking their bank app. They say it while hoping nothing unexpected happens this month. And the confusing part is this: on paper, it shouldn't feel this way. 2 incomes are supposed to mean safety, security, options. So why does it feel like the opposite? Why does life feel more fragile instead of more stable? That contradiction is where I want to start. Before we go any further, this is Donki. If you want calm, honest explanations about money, you're in the right place. I want you to imagine a couple. Not extreme, not irresponsible, just normal. They both work. They both earn decent money. Together they make more than their parents ever did. They bought a home that felt reasonable at the time. They drive cars that aren't flashy. They don't live wildly. And yet, if one paycheck stopped for a few months, everything would start wobbling. That's the part no one talks about. Not at dinner parties, not on social media, not even with close friends. Because admitting that feels wrong. It feels like confessing you did something wrong. But what if nothing went wrong? What if this outcome was built into the system itself? I don't ask that to be dramatic. I ask because the same story keeps repeating. Different cities, different careers, same quiet stress. Most people assume the explanation is spending. They think we must be leaking money somewhere, or we should budget harder. Those explanations feel comforting. They imply control. But I've noticed something unsettling. Even households that are careful, even households that plan, even households that don't splurge, often feel just as exposed. So maybe the problem isn't behavior, maybe it's structure. Think about how big decisions actually get made. No one wakes up and says, let's build a life that only works if nothing ever goes wrong. That's not how it happens. It happens in smaller steps. A mortgage that feels manageable, a neighborhood that feels important, a commute that feels acceptable. Each decision makes sense on its own. Each one is justified by math, by income, by approvals, by what other people are doing. And slowly, without noticing, something changes. Life stops being flexible, not visibly, internally. The system becomes tight. I want you to sit with that word for a moment. Tight, not poor, not reckless, just tight. Tight systems work until they don't. Here's something most people don't realize at first. The second income doesn't just add money, it changes what the household requires. Suddenly, things that used to be optional become fixed, not because of luxury, but because of access. Access to schools, access to time, access to normal life. And once those costs are locked in, they don't care why you can't pay them. They don't pause for stress. They don't adjust for burnout. They don't forgive exhaustion. They just exist. This is where the contradiction deepens. From the outside, a 2-income household looks strong. From the inside, it can feel brittle. And brittle things don't feel dangerous while they're intact. They feel normal. I often hear people say, we can't afford for either of us to stop working. They say it casually, like a fact of life. But that sentence hides something uncomfortable. It means the system has no slack, no margin, no unused capacity. Everything is already deployed. And that's very different from how things used to work. Not better, not worse. Just different in a way that changed the risk. There was a time when a household had 1 income active and 1 income waiting. Waiting didn't mean lazy. It meant unused. It meant available if something went wrong. Today, most households activated everything immediately. Both incomes are running at full speed, and when everything is already running, there's nothing left to call on. I want to be careful here. This isn't nostalgia. It's not about going back. It's about understanding what changed, because something did change. Not wages alone, not ambition, but the timing of dependence. Most people don't feel this until years in, until the tiredness becomes constant, until the idea of stopping feels impossible. That's when the anxiety shows up. Not sharp panic, low-level fear, the kind that hums in the background. What if something happens? What if one of us can't do this anymore? Those questions are usually pushed away because the answers feel scary. And here's the strange part. The stress doesn't come from wanting more. It comes from not being able to want less. The system doesn't allow it. You can't downshift easily. You can't pause. You can't experiment, because everything is calibrated to 2 paychecks arriving on time. I see how this messes with people psychologically. They look at the income number and feel confused. We make too much to feel this exposed, so they assume the problem is internal. They blame themselves. But the feeling doesn't go away, because the feeling isn't about money, it's about fragility, a system that works only under perfect conditions. And perfect conditions don't last. So I want to ask a question that most people avoid, not to scare you, but because avoiding it is more dangerous. If one income stopped for a while, not forever, just temporarily, what would actually happen? Not in theory, in reality. Would things tighten a little, or would they unravel fast? That question tends to sit uncomfortably, and discomfort is useful, because it points to something important. If your entire life requires constant motion to stay upright, is that stability, or is it balance under pressure? I'm not offering answers yet, because answers too early feel reassuring, and reassurance hides truth. Instead, I want you to notice the pattern, how often normal now means fully committed, how often success means no room to slow down, how often 2 incomes didn't create safety, they created dependency. And here's the hardest part. Once you're inside this structure, it feels impossible to step out. You don't see alternatives, you only see obligations, which raises a much bigger question. If 2 incomes were supposed to create freedom, why do so many people feel trapped instead? And if that trap isn't caused by spending, laziness, or bad decisions, then what is actually holding the door shut? That's the question I want you to sit with, because once you really see it, you can't unsee it. Let's go back to the question I left you with. If 2 incomes were supposed to create freedom, why do so many people feel trapped instead? I want to answer that slowly, because the wrong answer feels comforting, and the right answer feels unsettling at first. Most people assume the trap comes from what they're buying. The house was too expensive, the cars were a mistake, childcare costs too much. Those things matter, but they're not the core of it. The real issue sits one layer deeper. It's how the second income quietly changes the rules of the game. When both incomes are treated as permanent, something subtle happens. Your life stops being designed around resilience and starts being designed around throughput. Money comes in, money goes out. As long as the flow continues, everything works, but nothing is built to pause. Think about that. Very few households are designed to pause. Pause one income for 6 months, not because of disaster, just because life demanded it. Most systems can't handle that, not because the people are careless, but because the system was never meant to flex. Here's where a lot of people get confused. They think, but we're responsible, we save, we plan, and that might be true, but saving inside a fragile structure doesn't fix the structure, it just delays the moment you notice the cracks. The deeper problem is dependency, not debt, not spending, dependency. When both incomes are required to keep the lights on, neither income is truly optional, and when income isn't optional, it controls you. That's the part that rarely gets said out loud. Choice disappears long before money does. Now I want to introduce a shift, but not a solution yet, just a different way of seeing the same picture. Imagine 2 households earning the same combined income. On paper they look identical, but one household needs every dollar to survive, the other doesn't. One income could disappear tomorrow, and life would tighten, but not collapse. Those 2 households experience money very differently. Same income, different risk. And risk is the hidden variable here. Most financial advice focuses on returns. I'm more interested in fragility, because fragility doesn't announce itself when things are going well. It hides behind normalcy, behind routines, behind we're fine, until something interrupts the flow. Now here's the part that usually lands late for people. The second income didn't fail to create freedom. It was never meant to. It was meant to create capacity, and capacity can be used in 2 very different ways. You can use it to raise your standard of living, or you can use it to lower your risk. Most people do the first, automatically, not because they're greedy, because the system nudges them there. Banks qualify you based on capacity. Neighborhoods price themselves based on capacity. Schools cluster based on capacity. So capacity gets consumed, quietly, predictably, until there's nothing left unused. That's when stress becomes permanent, not acute, chronic. Now here's the shift I promised, and this is where things finally come into focus. The households that feel calm aren't the ones earning the most, they're the ones that need the least. That sentence sounds backwards at first, but sit with it. If your required income is low, You gained something most people don't even realize they lost. Leverage. Not leverage over others. Leverage over your own life. You can slow down. You can say no. You can absorb change. That's what real security looks like. Not abundance. Flexibility. This is where the second income takes on a completely different role. Instead of holding the system up, it becomes a buffer. Instead of being spent automatically, it becomes optional. And optional income behaves very differently than required income. Required income creates anxiety. Optional income creates power, not loud power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't show up on social media. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't about one income forever. It's about what your life depends on. If everything depends on both incomes showing up perfectly, you're living inside a narrow corridor. One unexpected turn, and you hit the walls. But if your core life can survive on one income, the corridor widens. You don't feel it immediately, but over time, something changes. Decisions stop feeling desperate. Work stops feeling like a trap. Money stops feeling like a constant test you might fail. And here's the strange part. From the outside, it doesn't look impressive. You don't look richer. You just look calmer. That calm comes from knowing you're not one event away from collapse. It comes from having unused capacity again. Remember that idea from earlier? Unused capacity used to be normal. Now it's rare, and rare things are valuable. This is the part most people miss entirely. The second income isn't dangerous. Using it as a foundation is. When you build your life on it, you remove your safety net. When you treat it as reinforcement, you create one. Same income, different architecture. And architecture matters more than effort. You can work incredibly hard inside a fragile system and still feel unsafe. Or you can work moderately hard inside a resilient one and feel steady. That's the trade-off nobody explains, because it doesn't sell well. It doesn't promise more. It promises enough. And enough doesn't sound exciting until you realize how rare it is. I want to leave you with this thought. Most people think financial freedom is about reaching a number. I don't see it that way. I see it as reducing how many things must go right for your life to work. The fewer assumptions your life depends on, the freer you are. Two incomes can absolutely help, but only if you don't spend them both before they arrive. Only if one of them remains optional, because the moment income becomes mandatory, it stops serving you and starts controlling you. That's the part that finally makes the contradiction make sense. Two incomes didn't fail. We just asked them to do the wrong job. And once you see that, the stress you felt starts to feel less mysterious, not gone, but understood. And understanding is the first quiet step toward control, not dramatic control, not overnight change, just the ability to breathe again. And sometimes, that's more than enough.